So good evening, everyone. It's really such a great pleasure to be with you tonight. And thank you so much, Sister Dimple, for your extremely generous introduction. And I would also just like to thank my dear friend and old brother, Jyoti, for having me. As he said, we've known each other for 40 years, and even though I just drop into JB every so often, I have a deep, deep love and respect for Jyoti. He's a wonderful example of spirituality. Maybe I should just tell you a little of my story and how I got here. As you heard, I'm from Australia and I grew up in Melbourne. And I think, like many of us at a place like here, you know, we were born into a world with so many challenges, and we really wonder, what is my place in the world? And I think from a young age, I was a bit of a searcher type, looking for something. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, to be frank. And I went to university. In fact, I started studying architecture at Melbourne University. But I left that and I wandered the world, and often I feel that was my education, because I came actually through Malaysia, Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, Africa, Europe. But I really didn't have a plan, to be frank, but I found myself always living in religious communities. So I lived with Sikhs and Buddhists and Muslims during Ramadan, and Hindus, and I went and touched my toes in the Ganges River in India. I lived with the Dalai Lama for a little while, and I lived in Christian communities in Europe. And I think my big question was really, okay, you know, there's so much beautiful things that I was hearing. I was young, but I was really interested, how do you convert belief, ideas, theories, philosophy into a tangible internal experience or a feeling, really to taste spirituality, not just believe it. And actually, I was living in London. I settled in London. I was living there for some years. And I was sort of shopping around all the different spiritual organizations. I used to say London was like a spiritual supermarket in those days. Everything was available. And I actually came across the Brahma Kumaris. And I'm not sure you're aware, but it's the world's largest spiritual group run by women, out of all denominations and all different religions. And the women I saw, you know, immediately in their face, I could see they were experiencing something. You know how I think we all read each other, we listen to the words, but actually it's often the vibrations in the face that really communicate something. And that sort of began me properly on my spiritual journey. And this spiritual journey, I think, is the inner journey, is the great journey of life, you know, the most important journey for all of us. And on this journey, to really know and experience who I am, know and experience God, the divine, but also the journey of beginning to understand and work with these powerful emotions that every single one of us experiences. Is that true? I think so. And just recently, I was talking to a friend who was telling me at the end of the Cold War, around the late 80s and early 90s, the American Army sort of had a lot of discussions about the atmosphere they were working in, the sort of world. And they came up with this little acronym called VUCA, V-U-C-A. VUCA stands for volatile. In other words, we live in a world where something can explode instantly, whether in our society out there or within us. The second word is U for uncertain. Everything is uncertain in our world at the moment. Anything can happen to anyone at any time, anywhere. And this uncertainty is the reason for exponential anxiety. Unfortunately, anxiety is absolutely going through the roof in all corners of the world, in all age groups. The third word is complex. What a complex world we have. Here we sit in Malaysia. I live in Australia. There's a war in Europe, and that war is affecting the prices of our petrol, the prices of our food, even after a short while. Every little part of the world is influencing every other part. And then finally, A is for ambiguous. In other words, nothing is clear. And really, there's not a clear answer to things, is there? Everything is a bit muddy and unclear. And so this is the sort of world we live in. And as a result of that world, I think often it impinges on our emotions in so many different ways. And I think a lot of the spiritual journey is learning about my emotions, having an understanding and working with them. And many years ago, I was teaching meditation in the Sydney jail. And they had a special prison where they were encouraging the prisoners to behave better. So if they behaved well, they got points and privileges. And if they didn't behave well, they lost points and they had to leave the jail. So it was really important for these prisoners to behave well. And there was 15 prisoners in this little prison within a prison. And when I went, all 15 turned up for meditation. I thought, isn't that great? They're interested in meditation. And then I found out they got points for coming to the meditation. But there was one man, and I remember it very clearly. He was very articulate, very intelligent, and he was in there for murder. And we were talking about the power of emotions, and he spoke so passionately that when he gets angry, he goes into a rage, and he loses complete control of himself. It's happened twice in his life, and he's killed people. And I think, we all have powerful emotions, not maybe as powerful as that, but we have the explosive style of emotion, which is very visible. Our anger and our aggression, etc. But the implosive emotions, which are the grief, the hurt, the guilt, the fear, I would say the implosive ones, they're not visible, but they're equally powerful. And probably the emotion that, is most visible is anger. And anger has a massive effect on the quality of life, on relationships. There's 3 layers of anger. There's the anger where you blast and you yell and you scream. That's the gross type. The subtle type is really, irritation, frustration. But the refined type of anger, I would say, is just avoiding somebody, not speaking to somebody. A lot of us wouldn't think that's a form of anger, but actually, in a very refined way, these emotions are not just the explosive type, but they're very refined. And even there's a lot of research into anger. I read some research that said that when you let go of anger in the form of a grudge, when you hold a grudge against somebody, it can relieve back pain. This is university research. Oh, thank you. This is university research. And so I think, it has an enormous effect on us. And even there's a lot of research about that when we are regularly angry, anger produces the stress hormones of adrenaline and cortisol, and they go rushing through my system. They just curse through my system. And when I'm regularly angry, it wears down the brain. There's cell atrophy and memory loss. So the effect of a powerful emotion is not just perhaps on another person. It's not only on my relationship with that person, it is also even affecting my health. And I think, as you know, very common understanding is that when I'm regularly angry, that what we find is that my blood sugar goes up, my blood pressure goes up, there's hardening of the arteries, and it affects my health of my heart. So how important is it for us to really begin to understand these emotions? And I'm just going to suggest, if everyone up the back, if we can just take a seat, if that's okay. And that would be really lovely. Thank you. Just having a little commercial break here. So thanks, everyone. Please take a seat, everyone up the back, and yeah, that'd be lovely. And so these emotions have a huge effect on the quality of my life. And what is our usual ways of dealing with them? Because we haven't really been, educated how to deal with them, what happens is that we suppress them. We suppress our emotions. We push down our anger, we push down our hurt, we push down our grief, but actually it comes out somewhere. So we overreact to things, we get very frustrated with things, and often it comes out in our health. It often emerges in our health. So the strategies to deal with this, sometimes we suppress, often we deny. And because the emotion doesn't look nice, and we don't feel comfortable when I'm under the influence of these powerful emotions, often we learn to deny them to ourselves. I think many of you may know of a very amazing organization called AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. It's actually quite an extraordinary organization. They have a program called the 12-step program for dealing with addiction. The first step is to admit I have a problem. And that is actually the hardest step of all, to really admit I have a problem. Sometimes we suppress, sometimes we deny, or sometimes we even avoid. We avoid situations that trigger my emotions. Sometimes we feel, well, I've come to terms with them, but we design my life so that I'm not influenced by situations or people. But often what we do is we blame. We actually point the finger of blame. It's a common strategy, and we start to say, because of your behavior, I got upset, I got angry, I got this feeling, I got that feeling. And this is the ultimate ignorance, I would say. Blame is the ultimate ignorance. Because what I'm really saying is, you are in control of my emotions. If you change, then I won't be the same. So there's so many, because we didn't really know how to deal with powerful emotions, these are all the strategies. Sometimes we deny, sometimes we suppress, sometimes we blame. But I think ultimately on the spiritual journey, we really begin to look deep and take responsibility. What I really love about spirituality is the first law of spirituality is that I am responsible for how I feel. And I would say the first step in even beginning the journey to healing my emotions, if I can say dealing with them, is to understand and take responsibility. Because let's say anger is the visible emotion. I often think of it like a volcano. The volcano explodes. And once I saw a volcano in Central America, and it was amazing. I walked right up to the lip and I looked down and all the water was frothing and bubbling. You know, it was really alive. And it was like symbolic that under our anger, there's often emotion that's been going on for years. Sometimes there's fear, the fear that people will see through my facade and see that I'm not as confident or as good as I often make out. Or there's the grief, which is the loss of true love in my life, that I really have lived my life, but I don't really feel I've had the experience of true love. Or the hurt that I haven't been respected or valued as I feel I should have in my life. Often when these things bubble inside me over many years, they emerge in different ways. And so to begin the journey of really understanding my emotions, I have to go deeper. What's underneath my anger? What's underneath that visible? What's the invisible feelings that have often been going around inside? The fear, the hurt, the grief, and these feelings. And that first law, I have to take responsibility for how I feel. There is no doubt people do behave badly, people are rude, but if I react, it's actually from me. I am responsible. And I can only begin the journey of healing these powerful emotions when I take responsibility for my feelings. As long as I keep saying it's because of you and because of this and because of that, I will remain unhealed. And this is what I love about spirituality, is that it makes me take responsibility and actually gives my power back to me. The second thing on the journey to healing emotions is I need to know myself. And I would say that these dysfunctional emotions, these negative emotions, are children of a dysfunctional relationship with me. When I don't have a healthy relationship with me, the children it produces are these negative emotions. In sociology, we all know when mum and dad don't have a really good relationship, it has an influence on the children, right? And if I am constantly self-critical, constantly putting myself down, constantly negative about the person I am and feeling inferior, when this relationship is unhealthy, then it produces a whole lot of emotions. And one of those emotions, I would say, is depression. And once in Melbourne, I went on a speaking tour with a man who was quite a well-known businessman. In the world, they say a successful person, I never liked that title myself. Just because you make money and you're well-known, you're successful. Because he went on this tour and I was also speaking with him because he was very depressed. He became extremely depressed. And he was saying that the World Health Organization says 1 in 4 people is clinically depressed. Every fourth human being. Isn't that amazing? Doesn't that make you wonder what sort of culture we've created that there's so much sadness? Because in psychology, depression is like a sadness that my dream in life to be loved and valued and respected hasn't happened. But in spirituality, depression is like the mourning for the loss of my true identity. I'm living my life, but who am I? And this is really where we start to go deep into the origin of the negative emotion and really the origin as to how to heal it. Because the first step in meditation is to know and experience who I am. When we start to go on this inner journey, I find that there's like 3 personalities inside. I'd say 2 of them are the seeds of so much of my negative emotion, of hurt and grief and anger and resentment. And one of them starts to heal. And the first one I call the personality of these 3 personalities, the I of arrogance or the I of superiority. And this personality takes its whole identity from my temporary body. Who am I? I'm just a whole set of labels, my gender, my nationality, my religion, my profession. What is common to all those labels? They are all temporary. They are all temporary. And when this I is ruling my inner world, I compare with others and I think, I am better, I know more, I am right. Have you heard that before? Don't you realize the way I think is the right way? And when it comes into my feelings, when my ego is really ruling my inner system, I feel so easily insulted, disrespected, not valued, excluded, sensitive. Anyone sensitive here? Wow, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed by Johor. I think we're all a bit sensitive, right? And whenever those emotions, these powerful emotions, feeling insulted, feeling disrespected, are in, I know that I'm being deceived by my ego. I'm being deceived by my false self. And the second I would call the ego of inferiority or the lack of self-respect. It's the flip side of the ego of superiority. And this I also takes itself from all the labels of my body, compares with others, but does the opposite. Others are better. Others know more. Others don't love me. Others don't value me. Others don't respect me. This goes round and round inside my head. And when that comes into my emotions, that's when I sometimes feel hopeless, inferior, unworthy, inadequate, and I would say depressed also. And so what happens when the false I rules my inner system? There is the seed of so much negative emotion. And so what happens is one day you're up, the next day you're down. 1 hour you're up, the next hour you're down. I'm sure you know the roller coaster of emotion. It's an exhausting way to live life. The third I is the original I. And this I is the permanent self, the soul, the spirit, the Atma. The Atma means I, the living, the dweller in the costume. The soul is a wonder. The soul is just a point. And in mathematics, a point exists, but it has no size. The soul is so subtle, and the soul sits in the front of the brain, in the center of the forehead. And you know, recently I was talking to a man in Australia who was telling me that science now says that this body is made up of around 40 trillion cells. Please don't ask me how they counted them. No idea. That's a lot, right? You think 40 trillion little building blocks make this material form. The soul is really more subtle than one cell. The soul is the consciousness. And I, the soul, have no gender, have no color, have no religion. It all comes with the temporary self. And actually, when I start to not just know and believe. 80% of human beings believe there's something more than a body. 80% think I am something more than this temporary human form, but we're not sure. When I know and believe and experience who I am, it's sort of a seed that automatically reconnects me with the original feelings of peace, power, love, and happiness. Actually, when we meditate, what is the aim of meditation? Most people say to be peaceful. Actually, that's the result. The aim of meditation is to know and experience who I am as the soul. The automatic consequence of living in the truth of who I am, experiencing the truth, you feel an incredible feeling of peace. When I began to meditate, quite honestly, when I traveled, as I said, I'd studied architecture. Seeing the state of the world, I thought I'll go back and I'll study social work or something, try to do something to help the world, so to speak. And yet when I began to meditate, and I just realized, just by knowing and experiencing who I am, it released the feeling of peace, an incredible feeling of internal peace that just sort of washed my mind, and then it really affects the organs of the body too, because the natural state of the self is peace. And I think that, when I begin to know myself, it's not that I really have to fight my anger and fight the negative emotion. No, I have to withdraw what is natural to me to be a peaceful soul. The more I become a peaceful soul, the less the old emotions have power over me. So first I need to know myself and take responsibility for my emotions. Second, really, that experience of who I am as a soul. And the more I become soul conscious, the less I fluctuate, the highs and lows based on the false self, the I of superiority and the I of inferiority. But the third thing I often feel is to experience true love. And there was an American psychiatrist who used to travel a lot, a woman called Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And very interesting woman, because she used to talk about grief a lot and how most of us carry so much grief inside. So when there's a loss in the life, it sort of opens this wound that's sitting inside of me. And, a lot of people, when in life, maybe we lose a job or we lose a loved one, and this grief emerges. But what she said is the original grief in all of us, and why sometimes when we lose a loved one or a family member or something, it seems such a deep thing, because it connects with the original wound that somewhere I lost the experience of perfect love, the love of God. And sometimes I feel the subtext of life is this search for true love, which is, I would say, the pinnacle human experience or emotional feeling. We search for true love. And you think, everyone in this room, how much have you given to your families? You give everything to your family. And yet, the huge human dilemma is that no relationship is permanent. No relationship is permanent. Whether it's time, whether it's change, whether it's conflict, whether it's death, the object of my love goes. And we feel the emotions, these powerful emotions of insecurity and fear and grief. How deep are these emotions? They're just such powerful emotions. And that's why really I think there's three sources of love. myself, God, and my family and friends. Most of us, like I was saying, unfortunately today, the relationship with the self is not very healthy. So not much love coming from me for me. God, my experience is that people have a lot of faith in God, but I'm not sure I really feel a deep love or belonging, a real living relationship. So my one source of love is my family and my friends. So when there's a loss, it's like my whole life goes into upheaval. So what is meditation? You know, what is spirituality? Spirituality is developing a loving relationship with myself as a soul and a loving relationship with God, the Supreme Soul. And you know, I find these days if I lay that platform in my life, it's permanent. Everything else around me is changing so fast, everything. But when I base my life on that which is permanent, it's like I'm building my life on a solid structure. But when I base my life on everything temporary, I invest in everything temporary, then the fear, the power, you know, the fear and so on, these emotions just get so strong and they influence me a lot. And so meditation is really first step is knowing and experiencing myself as a soul. When I meditate, I love the journey of just letting go the temporary self and just feeling the soul sitting lightly in the forehead, the soul that's lived before this body and after, the soul that's really beyond death, the real me. And when I'm in that state, I look through my mind and I have a real living relationship with the Supreme Soul, the Supreme Being, the Divine or God, a real connection. I'm not meditating on a concept or a belief or a point of philosophy. I'm having a real living relationship. You know, the most natural thing for a human being is to love. I think there's nothing more natural to have relationship. And all we're beginning to do here is beginning to open the door to a permanent source of love and allow myself to be completely loved. And I think that when that experience of love is there, that is the seed of really rebuilding my sense of self-value and my sense of self-respect. And so in a natural way, I start to have a much deeper sort of feeling about managing my emotions. And I think the whole path of spirituality is rebuilding the relationship with myself, rebuilding the relationship with God, and I develop a willpower not to dance to the tune of my emotions, but actually to decide how I want to feel much more inside. And definitely it's a journey. It's definitely a journey. And yet I think that when we're able to do this, we have more control. And even when we come in front of others who have very, very powerful emotions also, we're able to manage my response to their emotions too. So I'm aware that I was just going to speak for half an hour or so. And so if anyone would like to make a comment or ask a question, disagree with anything that's been said, you're most welcome.
I have so many answers to a lot of questions already, but we are supposed to have a chit chat. That was what was promoted. So we have to have a little chit chat, and I hope I want some questions from the audience. And you can actually stand up and talk and ask your questions directly to Brother Charlie. So you have any question that you want to ask regarding emotions? How do you deal with emotions? If it's not been answered yet, and if you have something to share, you want it, anyone, please volunteer. No volunteers? You know, they say when you don't have questions, it's either you've understood everything or you've understood nothing at all. So I hope it's the first one. Okay, brother, I'll ask you the first question. I'll take the privilege since some of them are still very shy. You know, I understand brother entered this knowledge when he was only 22. And a little birdie told me, brother was, I heard, I'm not sure whether this is the right word to use. I hope you don't mind, brother. Brother had a little hippie kind of lifestyle. And the transformation and what I see or over the years and what spirituality can actually do to you, I would love brother to share a little bit about that.
What to say? I think I was just saying at the beginning that, yeah, I was I was quite a searcher, really. And yeah, I was really looking for something. I wouldn't even say I was that unhappy, but I had a sense that, you know, the life we're often offered is very superficial. You know, it just seems like a pattern, you know, get a career, make money. What's the purpose of it all? What's the fulfillment? Because so many times, I'm not a counselor or a psychologist, but I meet so many people and I have had the privilege to travel a lot. And, you know, I think often we follow this formula for life and we get to a certain period, we feel quite empty and quite unfulfilled. And so I was really just, I suppose, looking for a deeper meaning for things. And in that, I actually, when I was young, I was probably describe myself as an atheist, to be honest. I found it hard to accept a God that was sort of punishing, judgmental, and authoritarian. I couldn't relate to it. I was very immature and young. And then as I was traveling, I became an agnostic. I used to say, I don't really know. I've got no idea. But actually, what happened to me when I was meditating in London when I began, and I really sat down, as I said, I meditated on God as the Supreme Soul, this sort of radiant jewel of light. And I just had this extraordinary experience of feeling completely loved. It was like to the core of my being, and it felt like something had been asleep in me. It sort of woke me up in a sense. And I think to this day, I love nothing more than to wake up early in the morning in silence and just sit for an hour or so. And what I try to do is not to think too much about yesterday, what I have to do today. You know how the mind is just constantly overactive, processing all my feelings in life. I just love to become the soul and just step back, withdraw, as I was saying, from all the limited self, the temporary self. We invest so much in the temporary self, but to invest more in my permanent self as the soul. And then just sit in front of God as a little child, in a sense. I really love that. And the more you become a child, it's almost like you're trying to work through your own ego, which I think is the biggest block to love in life. There's a deep relationship between ego and love. The more ego I have, the less lovable I am. It's why we love little children often, because they're relatively, I wouldn't say totally, but relatively egoless. And that's why my heart comes out. And I think that when I really experience who I am and experience the connection, it sort of lights up something that's gone to sleep. It lights up, relights up my inner world. So, yeah, to be frank, that experience was a long time ago, but every morning I enjoy that experience, and somehow I'm still here. That's the only way I can put it.
So become childlike. That's the answer, right, brother? And brother is so fun-loving, I would say. And this journey, now, brother has had his journey for 46 years, 45 plus years. Now, is it too late, really, for us to start a spiritual life? Are we interested? Is it too late or is it too early?
It's never too late. Never, ever too late. And, I think, as I was saying, anxiety is rising because we're seeing a very unstable world. As I said at the beginning, the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. I can't really rely on things out there. And this is why when I build a secure platform in myself, which is really, I live my life, I'm responsible to my family and my work, but I build my life based on knowing and experiencing who I am and experiencing the connection with God. I feel this is the most important investment in life at the moment, because I think the change is actually accelerating. It's not even going to get less. It's actually exponential, the change. And they often say that the reason we feel so stressed is because we can't really cope with this change. And actually, I think it's even deeper than that. It's when I base my life on falsehood that I feel this deep discomfort. Sometimes I think there's a crisis in the soul of humanity. And that you can't put your finger on something, you just feel really uncomfortable. You feel anxious or stressed or unhappy or depressed, or it's just a whole lot of feelings inside. Why? Because I've based my life on the falsehood that I'm a temporary body. And sometimes I think, what is life? We're born. So this is my mum, this is my dad, these are my brothers, these are my sisters, this is my city, this is my country. And this is my career and my profession and my business. And this is my wife, my husband, my kids, my grand. You build up this whole network. In 1 second it goes. And this is the big challenge for all of us, because I've based myself on that which is temporary. But when I base my life on that which is permanent, I understand that I know who I am. I love my family. I love my life. I love my job. But I know it's all temporary. And actually, I love the analogy that life is like a train journey. And when you sit in a train, what do? You come to a station, people hop on the train, people hop off. You go to the next station, people hop on, people hop off. Eventually, you hop off the train. The train is life. People come into your life, people go out of your life. Wealth, position comes into your life, goes out. Everything comes and goes. But what's permanent is I, the soul. And when I connect with that, then I enjoy the change, rather than when I think I'm a temporary body, I start to attach my heart to people and things. I build fear and insecurity in my life. As much as I attach my heart to that which is temporary, I will have so much fear of loss. And yet the most inevitable thing is that these things won't last. It's just absolutely inevitable. And it's obviously a big change. But spirituality says base your life on that which is permanent. And then you enjoy the flow of life rather than feel the anxiety around loss. And I think that's, in a sense, the more I do that and sow those seed of who I am and the relationship with God, somehow that seed then grows a tree of positive emotion in a natural way.
Thank you, brother. I love the line that it says that spirituality is based on what's permanent and what's not temporary. And what is not temporary, including our bodies, is temporary. So emotional stability is when I feel what I have taken back the most is when you go in, not out. And when you realize that you are nothing, just a soul, just as pure and as simple as that. So it's never too late. And you all have registered. Some of you have done the 7-day course many years ago. Some of you may have done it, but it's time. I think it is time that you can refresh, you can redo the 7-day course. And we find it really difficult. Sometimes we put a lot of notions in front of us. Oh, this is difficult to follow, or that is so difficult to follow. But when you actually begin to do it, I find that spirituality is an intoxication by itself. You don't need any other intoxication. And the longer I get into it, it's so beautiful. And it gets beautiful every single day, and it gets even more beautiful as the day passes. It gets hard when you are here and there, and like when God says you're putting one leg here and one leg there, and that time it was very difficult. And I just couldn't understand why it was not working, because I was not working it right.
So I'm just wondering if anyone wants
anyone
to
has
ask
a question,
something.
please help me.
Yes, it's true. And I think that the analogy of the train is a lovely one. And sometimes I think that the inner world is like a tree. A tree has a seed, a trunk, and branches and leaves. Our thoughts are like the leaves, and you know how we have so many thoughts and feelings, and sometimes we want to change them, so we cherry pick out some thoughts we don't like, but cherry pick out one and 10 more grow. But what's feeding the leaves are the branches, which are our mental and emotional patterns. And what's feeding the branches is the trunk, which is like our subconscious. But the seed is my sense of identity. Who am I? And when I'm body conscious, it's a false seed. So it influences the whole tree, the branches, the mental and emotional patterns, a lot of hurt and reaction and bitterness. And so all the thoughts are all over the place. But just so the truth of who I am as a soul, it starts to influence the trunk, influence the branches of mental and emotional patterns, and your thoughts are automatically, because you don't have to work on the level of thought. If you change the seed, the sense of self, the sense of identity. And one thing I think you said was really interesting, because we do mask our emotions, and yet others feel them, even when we mask them. Because what I've realized is that when you communicate with people, actually research says 80 to 90% is nonverbal. It's your face and your vibrations. So even though sometimes, in your mind, you meet somebody, oh, hi, how are you? Nice to see you. But in your mind, you're thinking, last week you said this to me, and 17 years ago you did this. Actually, people feel it. They absolutely feel. A lot of people wonder why people don't love me, because we feel they don't connect with my inner world. They do connect. And that's why I feel that the more you meditate and know yourself, your thoughts become clean. Your thoughts become pure. Your thoughts become benevolent. People feel safe with you. People don't feel judged by you. They feel safe in your space in a way. And that's why I think spirituality is so natural. It's sort of an internal healing. And in a way, I sometimes use the analogy of the hare and the tortoise. You know, that story of the hare and the tortoise. The hares are the ones who have a big problem in life. I've got to do something, you know, I better learn to meditate. And so I do that for a few weeks and then, you know, the problem goes. The tortoise is the one that does a little bit every day, every day. Every day I meditate. And my observation is the people who do that little bit every day, they start to flower and bloom and grow. Yeah.
Also strong, your anger is also strong. But once you connect with the seed, your anger drops, and in many ways your strong love also sort of dies down.
It's not really my experience. I think actually, you know, when you're loving most of the time, you feel really good about who you are as a person. You know, where our psychology is very interesting, because even though we get angry with people and we get really disturbed, deep down, I observe myself and I don't like myself so much. My self-respect goes right down. And I feel that, you know, we can absolutely fully engage with life and be very loving, very open, all those sort of feelings. So I would say the love capacity for love increases enormously, even peace and those sort of things. Because I think the negative emotions take a massive toll. Like I was saying at the beginning, on my relationships with others. You know, they say about anger that if you're really angry, it's like people have a little digital camera in their mind. They go click, click, click. And you have to behave peacefully for 6 months before people wipe out that image. Carelessness of just a few seconds affects my life. So I think that just as you have the power of negative emotion, like you're saying, the power of positive emotion, it creates a very rich and I think meaningful life. That's at least my experience. Yeah.
Thank you, Brother. And if you have further questions, we're running out of time. You can send us your questions, Brahma Kumaris. We will be very honored to answer your questions for you, or we can even send it to Brother Charlie and get his reply from it. So now I would love to thank Brother Charlie for a wonderful experience, a wonderful talk. What you're going to receive now, we call it words of empowerment. You can make your way up to the stage and collect your words of empowerment and a sweet to sweeten your mouth. And then you can come back and take a seat where you are, and refreshments will be served to you. Om Shanti.